Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining today. Let's take a moment to connect with our compassionate intention for being here today. We are here not just to spend an hour online, but so that we can be more present and compassionate for the sake of all sentient beings. Right, and there is a link to the opening prayers in the description of the video, so we'll start with those. And we're going to say these in Tibetan, but you are free to chant along in English if that's easier for you. The first one we'll do 3 times, and then the next prayers we'll do 1 time each. Organ yugi numjan sam bemage sa dombola yatsen chogi ngodrupe bema june jesura Gordu kandro mangpo kor ketki jesu dak druki jinji lo chia shek su so Guru Pema City Home Organ Yugi Numjan Sam Pema Gesa Dompola Yatsen Chogi Ngodrupe Pema June Jesurak Gordu Kandro Mangpo Kor Ketki Jesu Dak Druki Jinji Lop Chia Shek Su So Guru Pema City Home Organ Yugi Numjan Sam Pema Gesa Dompola Yatsen Chogi Ngodrupe Pema June Jesurak Ordu Kandro Mangpo Kor Yatki Jesu Dak Druki Jinji Lop Chia Shek Su So Guru Pema City Home. And then continuing on. Kunzan dosem garab shiri sing pema kara chepani shunga sozo nubnya terten gata so kate lama namla so vadem. Ogmen choki himki pojana dosum sange kongi ngowonin Rangsam choku ngonsum tonze pe tsawe lama namla so vadem. Sashi po chu chu ting me do cham ri ram ling ji ni de gen padi sangye sing do mek te po wai droko nam da jing la chok par shok tram guru ratna mandala puta mega samudra saparana samaya om. Samchen namki sampadang loi je jak jitawar je chon tumon tepai choki korlo kordu so. All right. So now that we've set our intention, we will start with a brief meditation to stabilize our minds. Meditation is the natural state of mind when it is relaxed, stable, and open. So meditating in this way trains our mind to be calm and relaxed, and also alert and wakeful. The point of this meditation is to create space in our minds. Creating space in our minds helps us to balance our emotions and gives us space between action and reaction. So we're not just like a rubber ball bouncing around off of all of our afflictive emotions and the experiences of our day. We actually have some space in which we can cultivate compassion. And this space in our mind is the first step in the development of bodhicitta, which is the compassionate wish to free all sentient beings from suffering. So take a comfortable seat. You can sit in a chair or cross-legged on the ground like I am. And place your hands in your lap, gently relaxed. Check in with your posture. You want your spine to be straight. You can kind of imagine a thread going up through the top of your crown, keeping your neck straight so your head is sitting on your neck, sitting on your spine. Your shoulders are open, your elbows are out slightly, giving your rib cage room to breathe. And your eyes are going to remain gently open. So you can imagine a line following the bridge of your nose and extending down to the floor. And then find a place along that line where it's comfortable to rest your gaze. And lastly, place the tip of your tongue gently behind your front teeth. Allow yourself to relax completely and breathe normally. And then put a very light attention on your breath. Don't try to control it at all. Just breathe naturally with the most gossamer thin attention on the surface of your breath. It's like taking your pulse. You don't put any pressure on it, just observe it. Your attention is like a feather, gently riding on the surface of your breath. And when thoughts come up, just let them go, like bubbles popping on the surface of a pond. You don't have to look to see what they are. Your meditation is not lost by hearing your thoughts, but by following them down the road. So anytime you find yourself following a thought, just drop it. Come back to your breath. Drop the thought. Return to your breath. Just return again and again to that gossamer thin attention on the surface of your breath. And we will go for 5 minutes. So that is a simple meditation called Stabilizing the Mind meditation. And it's a great meditation because you can do it pretty much anytime, anywhere. Even just doing it for a few minutes a day is really helpful for stabilizing your mind. And if you're interested in trying to establish more of a habit of meditation, then you might want to participate in KPC's February Meditation Challenge. You can join us on social media to learn more about this on our Facebook and Instagram. But we will be doing a meditation challenge for the month of February, encouraging you to meditate for just 5 minutes a day, and we'll provide you with different resources to help you with your meditation practice, with some different instructions on a few different types of meditation, quotes to inspire you to meditate, and community. It's nice sometimes to know that you're not the only one meditating and trying to start a new habit. So I hope you'll join us for that. Many people think that meditation is simply about relaxing or letting go. I think meditation is getting more and more popular in America and in the West, and it's being adopted by therapy community. It's used a lot in, it's mentioned a lot in articles about self-care, and so the angle in which people normally hear about meditation is just, it's kind of like a thing you can do to relax and feel better. You might think it's got something to do with like watching the sunset or watching the waves on the beach, just something to peace out, bliss out. From a Buddhist perspective, meditation is a little bit more than that. So the real context of Buddhist meditation is referred to as view, meditation, and action. And together, these three components, view, meditation, and action, constitute a skillful path to enlightenment. And that expression might be new to you, but if we think about it, we always act with, according to a certain view, meditation, and action. For instance, if you want to buy a car, you choose the one that you think is best, the safest, the most reliable, the most fun to drive. And the view in this case is the idea or belief that you have that this car is a good one. And then the meditation is contemplating that, getting used to the idea. And then the action is actually buying the car, driving it, and using it. So this process is not necessarily a Buddhist thing. It's something that we do all the time. And you don't have to call it view, meditation, and action. Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche says that you might also think of it as idea, getting used to, and obtaining. So of these three components on the path, view is the most crucial. Meditation and action are methods that bring us closer to the view. Meditation or practice doesn't just mean sitting meditation either. It could be any method that purifies our dualistic mind and brings us closer to the view. And similarly, Buddhist actions or behaviors should work against our habitual dualistic patterns and bring us closer to the view. So you can see how meditating just for relaxation without understanding what view it's supposed to be bringing you closer towards would not be the same as Buddhist meditation. Buddhist meditation should be helping you to move closer to the view. And we'll get to what that view is. For another example of what view is, we could think of a sea captain. So, for instance, someone told me once, someone who I believe was in the Navy, told me once that, there are different stories about how people came to understand that the earth is not flat. And they were like, these stories are ridiculous. Sailors always knew the earth was round. Otherwise, they wouldn't have set sail. And you can see when you're sailing, you can see the curvature of the earth. So, but he was like, this is just silly. Sailors have always known the earth is round. So if you think of a sea captain, before he sets sail to go around the world, this sea captain has to have complete confidence in the fact that the earth is round. If he didn't have that view, he wouldn't think about sailing from, let's say, New York to Auckland. And he wouldn't even chart the course. If he genuinely believed that the world was flat and thought it was possible to fall off the edge of the earth, then he would never set sail. So we know that the roundness of the earth is a proven physical fact. You can observe it, especially when you're on the seas. You can observe the curvature of the earth. Based on that fact, the sea captain's view is that he will be able to sail from New York to Auckland without falling off the edge of the earth into oblivion. There's no need for him to constantly reinforce this view by saying, the earth is round, the earth is round, the earth is round, the earth is round, day and night. Because he's certain. He knows it. He knows it to be true. This is the way the world is. It's round. And he can even use a two-dimensional map to plan his route without being deceived by the fact that the map is flat. That doesn't deceive him into thinking that the world itself is also flat, or that his ship might fall off the edge of the earth. So all of this demonstrates how indispensable the right view is. So the view that we try to get used to in Buddhism has 4 essential characteristics. These are also known as the Four Seals. And they're called the Four Seals because it's like the wax seal on a letter that lets you know that that message came directly from the king. It's a stamp of authenticity. So whether a path or philosophy is called Buddhist or not doesn't really matter. The words Buddhist and Buddhism don't matter that much. They're not important. If these 4 seals are present in a path or philosophy, then it can be considered the path of the Buddha. So for example, when Jetsama began teaching, she didn't know anything about Buddhism. She had never studied it. She taught from her own mind, in her own way. And she didn't know any of the terminology. She didn't think of it as Buddhism. She didn't call it Buddhism. She was teaching what she knew from her own meditations. But when His Holiness Pena Rinpoche met her, he interviewed her and he interviewed her students about, what she was teaching, what they were learning. And he determined that it was authentic Mahayana Buddhism. So we can use these 4 seals to determine whether a teaching, a path, or philosophy is authentic Buddhism or not. And these 4 seals apply to all Buddhist traditions. They're not specific to any one tradition. So the 4 characteristics are called the 4 Seals of Dharma. The first one is that all compounded things are impermanent. All emotions are painful. All phenomena are empty. They are without inherent existence. And this third one is actually the ultimate view of Buddhism, and the other 3 are grounded on this third seal, that all phenomena are empty and without inherent existence. And the 4th seal is that nirvana is beyond extremes. So all compounded things are impermanent, all emotions are painful, all phenomena are empty, and nirvana is beyond extremes. In today's spiritual marketplace, with so many books, so many teachers, so many charlatans out there, and it's all available to you at the click of a mouse, it can be difficult to know who or what to trust. So it's very important to understand what the four seals are so that you can tell what's the real deal and what isn't. You could meet someone who claims to be a high lama and he sits on brocades and he's got all the fancy Buddhist looking stuff. But if his teachings don't have these four seals, then he would not be teaching the path of the Buddha. On the other hand, you could have a surfer giving you teachings on how to sit on a beach watching a sunset. And if what he says contains all these four seals, it would be Buddhism. So today's class is going to focus on the first seal. All compounded things are impermanent. So all form, including our body, all of our emotions, all of our perceptions, are assembled. They're the product of two or more things coming together. So when two or more components come together, a new phenomenon emerges. Nails and wood become a table. Tea leaves and water become tea. A seed, soil, water, and light becomes a watermelon or a stalk of corn. The tea, the table, and the watermelon don't have an existence independent of their parts. And meanwhile, just by meeting, the character of those parts has changed, and together they've become something else. They've become compounded. And this applies not only to the human experience, but to all matter, the entire world, and the universe. And not just obvious perceptible phenomena either. Mind, time, memory, and God are all also assembled. Each assembled component in turn depends on several layers of assembly. So it's not just the water and leaves become tea. The leaves had to come from somewhere. A plant had to grow. Someone had to grow the plant. Someone had to pick the plant. Someone had to transport those leaves and put them in put them in little satchels and box them up and get them to a store and get them to your house. And then you had to boil water. And, there's all of these as pieces of assembly that have to come together. So everything that exists is interdependent, and therefore it's subject to change. There's nothing in all creation that exists in an autonomous, permanent, pure state. Nothing. As long as something exists within reach of our mind, even if it's just in our imagination, then it depends on the existence of something else. And because it depends on the existence of something else, it can change. Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche says, if there's no paper, there's no book. If there is no water, there is no ice. If there is no beginning, there is no end. The existence of one very much depends on the other. Therefore, there is no such thing as true independence. Because of interdependence, if one component, the leg of a table, for example, makes even a small shift, then the integrity of the whole is compromised, unstable. Although we think that we can control change, most of the time it's not possible because of the countless unseen influences of which we are unaware. And because of this interdependence, the disintegration of all things in their current or original state is inevitable. Every change contains within it an element of death. Today is the death of yesterday. So this act of assembly is by nature bound by time. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this cup, for instance, did not exist before. It appears to exist now, and eventually it will fall apart. Similarly, the self that existed yesterday is different from the self that exists today and from the self that will exist tomorrow. Today, maybe your sour mood has improved. Maybe you learned something new. You have new memories. The paper cut on your hand has healed a little bit. Our existence seems continuous, but it's actually a series of beginnings and endings bound by time. And the most obvious beginning and ending is birth and death. And most people accept that everything born must eventually die. Although people are constantly looking for the elixir of immortality. I just read an article the other day that Jeff Bezos is investing in some new project to find immortality and, defy aging. Generally speaking, most people accept that what's born must die. But our definitions of everything, birth, and death might differ. Birth refers to all creation, not just trees and birds and human beings, but everything that is born or assembled in some way. And death refers to any kind of disintegration or disassembly. Therefore, impermanence does not mean death as we normally think of it. It means change. Anything that changes in relation to another thing, even the teeniest, tiniest thing, is subject to the laws of impermanence. Even if it only changes in the slightest way, it's subject to the law of impermanence. And accepting impermanence may seem like a real downer. It doesn't sound great. Everything that's born must die. This glass will eventually shatter. It sounds like a downer. But actually, it frees us to enjoy things as they are without being trapped by blind hope or by fear. Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche says, if one knows that everything is impermanent, one does not grasp. And if one does not grasp, one will not think in terms of having or lacking, and therefore one lives fully. Is it our habit to live fully? No. Our habit is to seek immortality. Even if we're not Jeff Bezos, even if we don't have the money to look for that, if we're not Ponce de Leon or whoever wants to find the fountain of youth, we have these subtle ideas in our head, like eternal love, everlasting happiness. We seek salvation, eternal salvation. Our storybooks end with a wish for happily ever after, and that's what we want when we get married and we fall in love. We want happily ever after. And all of these desires are nothing more than a desire for permanence. We want permanence. And as the Buddha has taught, when we desire things to be other than they are, we suffer. So instead, it's better to accept that things are impermanent. And then we can live our lives in a fuller way. Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche says, at the very least, Buddha advised, we must try to keep the concept of impermanence in mind and not knowingly conceal it. By maintaining our awareness of assembled phenomena, we become aware of interdependence. In recognizing interdependence, we recognize impermanence. When we remember that things are impermanent, we are less likely to be enslaved by assumptions, rigid beliefs, both religious and secular, value systems, or blind faith. Such awareness prevents us from getting caught up in all kinds of personal, political, and relationship dramas. We begin to know that things are not entirely under our control and never will be. So there's no expectation for things to go according to our hopes and fears. There's no one to blame when things go wrong, because there are countless causes and conditions to blame. We can direct this awareness from the farthest regions of our imaginations to subatomic levels. Even atoms can't be trusted. So thinking of some examples of impermanence and ways that we can direct our awareness to think this through. For instance, we could start with thinking of life on Earth. Life on Earth depends on specific causes and conditions. Our planet is located in the Goldilocks zone. It's the right distance from a sun of the right size that hasn't supernovaed yet, or it's we have oxygen, we've got water, we have an atmosphere that we have a stable enough atmosphere, the right amount where the planet is the right size, so we have enough gravity to stay on the planet without being crushed by too much gravity. There are all sorts of causes and conditions that allow life to be on Earth. And when people look for life on other planets, they're looking for places with similar causes and conditions, because we've come to understand that these are the causes and conditions that support recognizable life. But those causes and conditions on Earth could disassemble, and they will at some point. Perhaps a super volcano will erupt and blot out the sky, and and all life on Earth will be wiped out. Or a meteor could strike, and if it's big enough, you could have some kind of interplanetary collision. I think I read at some point that that's one of the theories of how the moon formed, was some kind of collision, and now we've got a rock that's stuck in orbit around the Earth. So you never know what can go on in space. The sun could explode. At some point the sun will come to an end, and at that point, the Earth would be enveloped within its fiery demise. And then if you look up at the night sky, the stars in the night sky, many of them are already long gone. They've been gone for a million years, and we're still enjoying their light, enjoying their constellations. And they don't actually exist anymore. We're looking at an echo of what used to be there in a way. And the continents on our planet are still shifting. The continents are constantly moving, and mountains, that seem so stable, are actually, some mountains are growing as they're being pushed up by tectonic plates, and while others are becoming smaller because they're being worn away by the elements. And even nationalities and races are ever changing. And yet we put so much stock in that, in nationalities and races and the borders between our countries, and our having a strong national identity and protecting the border. It's ridiculous. How many people die every year protecting some line in the sand, or that has a name attached to it, and that name has changed over history? I thought it was interesting. I've gotten into the ancestry.com fad, looking at my ancestors, and I had this one branch in my family that I was always told was Austrian, and so I was trying to find their immigration records and trying to find when they came over from Austria, and I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find anything related to Austria. And then I finally learned that at the time that they immigrated, it wasn't called Austria. The country was called Austria-Poland. And they came from the Polish side of Austria-Poland. And so all of their papers were in Polish. All their names were Polish. What we would now consider Polish, but on some documents, because it was called Austria-Poland, it was listed as Austria. So, it's like even difficult to look up your ancestry, because the countries have changed names and changed borders, and they're not even what they used to be called. And the leaders of these countries, legendary leaders, are also unstable. They rely on causes and conditions. They rely on, having people who believe in their vision. They rely on having fundraising for their political campaigns, a certain amount of funds. They rely on all sorts of things that are not under their control, like, the policies of their predecessors, and how that's affecting the current economic situation. And that can affect whether someone rises to power or not. There was something really fascinating that I read about a number of years ago, that you can look at there's a number of causes and conditions you can look at to determine whether the next president will be someone who built their career as a governor or mayor or military leader or senator. And it has to do with what the people want based on certain causes and conditions. And they think, someone who was a governor of a city, they would make someone who was a governor of a state, that would be the best candidate for this time. Or someone who was a mayor of a city, we really need them to know the things a mayor would know. That would make them the best candidate. And it has to do with all sorts of things, like whether we're currently in war, or what the economic conditions are, or different things. And that's something that's entirely out of that politician's control. They could be a really excellent candidate, but it's not the right time because the country wants a former general and not a mayor. Our international relations are impermanent. The definitions of ally and enemy are constantly changing. Who are our allies? Who are our enemies? That has changed so much. You've got all these different wars where these people gang up against this guy, and then they switch sides, and then now they're buddies for this other war. And even within our own lives, we can see that. We can see the volatile nature of who our foes are and who our friends are. I remember one time when I was a little kid and I came home from school crying because my best friend sat with another girl at lunch. And, that's like the world's ending when you're 7. And my mom told me then, friendships go through seasons. And they do. Friendships go through seasons. All of our relationships go through seasons. They change. And someone who was, think of how many friends that you've had in your life. You don't even know what they're up to now. You're not even in touch. And there may have been someone who, bullied you once, or who you had no interest in whatsoever, or that just, you didn't think you would ever get along with, who then could later become your best friend. You don't know. It's so fickle. Even our definition of morality has changed throughout human history. What was moral in the Middle Ages is different than what's considered moral now. And our ideas of what's politically correct or not are changing, I'd say maybe hourly. That changes constantly. What is the correct term to use for any race or group or movement, or even if you think about our lights are impermanent, power is impermanent. For instance, if you think of the LGBTQ movement, which I think now is the LGBTQIA plus community, they've gone through a variety of different flags to represent that movement. I saw someone in a social media group I was in recently ask, they were gonna I don't know, she had something for work she had to do, and she needed to know what the correct flag was to show support for this community. And there are like over 10 different designs for a flag that supports each element of this community, of the LGBTQ community. So, and different ones have been considered the correct one or the most politically correct one at different times in history. We can also think about the changing social norms, like Asian societies at one time found it acceptable for women to go without a top. You can see that in a lot of older Asian art. You can see topless women. But now, in those same countries, it would be considered morally wrong to go braless. This Western Puritanism has, come over there and influence the idea of what is morally correct and not. So now showing skin, going braless, that would be seen as being wrong. And then beauty. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It certainly is. Our definition of beauty has changed throughout history. At some points in history, this is just in Western culture, at some points in history, women were considered beautiful when they had, big hips, big breasts, they're really full figured. And then at other points in history, it like anorexic heroin look was really in. And then it bounces back. And then it's, at some points it's thin lips, some points it's full lips, no butt, big butt. It changes constantly. The definition of beauty changes constantly. And we can see that from within our personal relationships too. The way that we perceive others we have causes and conditions that then contribute to how we judge their beauty and their appearance. So for instance, when I was my high school boyfriend, I was very attracted to him. And then one day he had the brilliant idea to shave his head and put a temporary tattoo on his neck. And I thought, my God, what am I thinking? What was I thinking? And I found him very unattractive until his hair grew back and the temporary tattoo was gone. So apparently those were causes and conditions that really influenced my perception of him. And if you're in a relationship for a long time, and you age and grow old together, your perception of beauty might no longer be based as much on what you're seeing with your eyes, but might be more based on the mutual trust, your familiarity with this person, all of the memories you have together. There might be other causes and conditions that lead to your perception of beauty in this person, even as they age and they fall further away from our standard societal definition of beauty. There's so many causes and conditions influencing all of our experiences. Dzogchen Jamyang Khyentse says, death is continuous from the moment of birth, from the moment of creation. Each change is a form of death, and therefore each birth contains the death of something else. For instance, we can consider cooking an egg. Without constant change, we could not boil an egg. Boiling an egg relies on some fundamental causes and conditions. So you obviously need an egg. You would need a pot of water. You would need water. You would need some sort of heating element like a stovetop. You might also need a kitchen or an egg timer, a spoon to lower the egg carefully into the boiling water so it doesn't crack, a hand to hold the spoon. It also requires the absence of interruption. Your power can't go out while the egg is boiling. or, someone couldn't turn off the burner accidentally, or knock the pot off the stove while you're boiling the egg. And furthermore, each of those conditions requires another set of causes and conditions. The egg depends on a hen to lay it, who is dependent upon its own mother to have laid an egg, and so on. And the hens require a chicken coop and water and food, and the farmers to tend them and collect the eggs, and to protect them so no fox gets into the coop and kills the chickens. And the chicken feed has to be grown and harvested and processed somewhere and be transported to the chickens. And it can't get moldy. It's got to be fresh. And you can continue to break down all of these dependencies all the way down to the subatomic level. Dzogchen Gyalman Khyentse says, when all the innumerable causes and conditions come together and there's no obstacle or interruption, the result is inevitable. Many misunderstand this to be fate or luck, but we still do have the power to have an effect on conditions, at least in the beginning. But at a certain point, even if we pray that the egg won't cook, it will be cooked. And like the egg, all phenomena are the product of layer upon layer of assembly of myriad components. And therefore, they are variable. Most of these myriad components are beyond our control. And for that reason, the phenomena we experience often defies our expectations. All forms, feelings, perceptions, traditions, love, trust, mistrust, skepticism, and even faith are assembled. And therefore, they are highly unpredictable. When we learn to see the assembled nature of all things, all situations, all of our experiences, we learn to cultivate forgiveness, understanding, open-mindedness, and fearlessness. For example, we could think of John Lennon's murder, and we could pin John Lennon's murder on Mark Chapman alone. But if we look at John Lennon's murder with this understanding of the assembled nature of phenomena, we can unpack that more, and we can see there's actually a lot went into that. For instance, if our culture's celebrity worship weren't so great, then maybe Mark Chapman wouldn't have created the fantasy of killing John Lennon. Because afterwards, Chapman admitted that when he shot John Lennon, he didn't see him as a real human being because of that celebrity worship. So if that wasn't a component, maybe this wouldn't have happened. He was also mentally unstable, which was due to a number of factors. That could be, his brain chemistry, which could be hereditary, which then would have multiple hereditary causes and conditions. His upbringing, the U.S. mental health care system. And then when we can see how a mind that, how the sick and tormented mind of a killer is assembled, we recognize the conditions under which it's operating, and we're better able to understand and forgive the Mark Chapmans of the world. And when we see all of the pieces that come together, all of these components that come together, we can also see that even if we were to pray for the assassination not to be, it would have been inevitable, just like the boiled egg, because you can see all these pieces came together, and therefore this is the boiled egg. John Lennon is dead. But even with this understanding, we might still fear the Mark Chapmans of the world because of their unpredictability. The dominant psychological states of the human mind are fear and anxiety. And behind fear lies a constant longing to be certain, We want to be certain. And there I think that's related to that wish for permanence. Again, we want to know how things are definitively, how they're going to be. We're afraid of the unknown. That mind's craving for confirmation is rooted in the fear of impermanence. So when you appreciate uncertainty, you generate fearlessness. When you have faith in the impossibility of these interconnected components remaining static and permanent, knowing that they will change, you generate fearlessness. And then you find yourself preparing for the worst while allowing for the best, being open to a number of ways that things could turn out, knowing that everything's quite unpredictable and will shift. The only thing that really is predictable is change itself. It will change. Things will change. So you become dignified and majestic. And with those qualities, you have more of an ability to work, to wage war, to make peace, to create a family, to build a career, to enjoy your personal relationships, to fall in love. By knowing that something unknown is always lying in wait around the bed, by accepting the countless potentialities that exist in any given moment, you acquire the skill of pervasive awareness and foresight. And then you become like a gifted general who is not paranoid, but is prepared. Because he knows that things can shift at any time. He knows that this piece could go wrong, or that piece could go wrong, or this piece could go wrong. Like a skilled chess player too, you can kind of see, all of the different ways that things could change. Oh, you notice all the different components that are there. And then you become fearless and dignified and majestic. And who doesn't want that? And we can remember that if there's no impermanence, then there's no progress or change for the better. If we trust impermanence, we don't suffer so much when things don't go our way. For instance, if you're sick or you're injured, you're in pain, you can know that it's impermanent, and that's quite a relief. If you're unemployed or you're stuck in a job you hate, or any kind of situation in which you feel really stuck and unhappy, you can have faith that impermanence will bring an end to it at some point. It's bound to change. And it's changeable by understanding the causes and conditions that are creating the situation that you're in. So the recognition of impermanence frees us from the fear of remaining forever stuck in a situation or habit or a pattern. So we tend to be escapists. We don't tend to look at things as they really are. We tend to just escape the hard reality of stuff. And that escapist mentality does not empower you to change your life and to get the results that you want. The escapist mentality is inherently disempowering. So the Buddha was not an escapist. He was a realist. He wasn't a pessimist. He was a realist. And when he said that all assembled things are impermanent, he didn't intend for that to be bad news. It's just the way things are. It's a simple scientific fact. So, and depending on your perspective and how you understand this fact, it can open the door to inspiration and hope and success. For example, we can see that global warming and poverty are products of insatiable capitalistic tendencies, right? And so we can see that they are assembled, and therefore they can be reversed, they can be changed. Because of the impermanent nature of assembled phenomena, we can identify the components at play and work to change them. So we don't have to depend on supernatural powers like God's will to reverse negative trends. All we need is a simple understanding of the nature of assembled phenomena. And when you understand phenomena, when you understand the components, you can manipulate them and thus affect the causes and conditions. And when we recognize the instability of causes and conditions, that leads us to understand our own power to transform obstacles. We can make the impossible possible. So, for instance, if you really want a BMW or, I don't know, whatever the fancy car is now, you can create the conditions to have one. As long as there is a BMW, there's the opportunity for you to own one. Or if you want to live longer, you can stop smoking and exercise more, and reduce your high blood pressure. There is reasonable hope, not blind hope. There's reasonable hope. So hopelessness and blind hope are the result of a belief in permanence. But understanding the assembled nature of phenomena gives us reasonable hope. It gives us hope that we can transform not only our physical world, but our emotional world. For example, we can turn agitation into peace of mind by, we can let go of ambition or let go of our expectations of others, and then we can find more peace. Or we can, if we're suffering from low self-respect, we can turn that into confidence by engaging philanthropically and acting out of kindness. We can build up our self-respect. If we put our feet in other people's shoes, we will cultivate peace in our homes, with our neighbors, and therefore with other countries. We can start influencing things just right from where we are. And I recently watched this movie, The Courier, with Benedict Cumberbatch, which is an excellent movie. And he plays a businessman who's recruited by M16 and the CIA to be a courier to bring intelligence back from a partner they have someone in Russia who's willing to send some information over to CIA M16, but they need someone to bring it. And so they recruit Benedict Cumberbatch, his character. And his character and the Russian guy that he meets with, they develop a friendship, and he has the Russian guy over to his house to meet his family. And, this is during the Cold War. Everyone's sure nuclear war is going to break out anytime. And Benedict Cumberbatch, his son, asked the Russian guy about, don't your people hate our people? And he makes the point, no, our politicians hate your politicians, but the people don't hate each other. We're just people. And, two people, we're just two people, but here we are having dinner together, And this is how change happens. We're just two people, but this is how change happens. So, and they actually did cause, the movie's based on a true story, and it actually did change quite a lot, their relationship. So even just small friendships, like a small partnership with someone, a small friendship with someone, can influence our world more than we think. So we have such a capacity to affect assembled phenomena on a mundane level, just starting with cultivating peace in our own minds, cultivating peace in our relationships, that ripples outwards. And the Buddha taught that even the ideas of like heaven and hell are impermanent as well, because they are also assembled. So hell doesn't exist as a permanent state somewhere underground where people suffer eternal torture. It's more like a nightmare. We've all had nightmares. When you're in that nightmare, it feels like it lasts forever. It feels like you're never going to get out. And that nightmare happens because of particular causes and conditions. Dzongchen Rinpoche gives the example of a dream in which an elephant tramples you. And that comes about because, one condition is you're asleep. And then maybe you have some traumatic history with elephants. And it doesn't matter how long the nightmare lasts, during that time, you're in hell. Feels like it. And then because of the causes and conditions of your alarm clock going off, or just because you finished sleeping, you wake up. And that dream is like a temporary hell. And that's not unlike our concept of a real hell in Buddhism. So similarly, if you have hatred towards someone and you engage in acts of aggression and revenge towards them, that also is an experience of hell. And these negative states of hatred and revenge and political manipulation have created hells on earth, experiences of hell for many people on earth. For instance, like child soldiers, the experience of being forced into being a child soldier. And a child who has no opportunity to play or celebrate their birthday because they have to carry an AK-47 around and shoot their brothers and their friends. That is a hell. And we have these kinds of hells because of causes and conditions, which means we can change them. We can exit these hells by using love and compassion as antidotes to the anger and hatred that is creating them. So the concept of impermanence is not inherently positive or negative. It's just part of the process of the compounding of things. And we usually appreciate only half of the cycle of impermanence. We like birth, but not death. We like gain, but not loss. We like the end of the school year, but not the beginning, maybe. Depends on how you feel about school. But true liberation comes from appreciating the whole cycle, not just grasping on to the parts we like. And if we remember the changeability and impermanence of causes and conditions, both positive and negative, we can use them to our advantage. So everything is temporary. Wealth is temporary, health is temporary, peace and fame are temporary, and all of their opposites are temporary too. Poverty, ill health, war, and obscurity, those are all temporary too. They can be changed. So when we come back to the phrasing of this seal, all compounded things are impermanent, or all assembled things are impermanent. Do we really need all of those words? Why can't we just say all things are impermanent? It's true that all things are impermanent. You don't really need the qualifying word assembled. But the reason that it's there is that we need to take every opportunity to remind ourselves of the assembled nature of phenomena. The assembly, we have to remind ourselves about the assembly in order to maintain the logic behind this statement. Things aren't impermanent just because somebody decided it's impermanent. It's impermanent because of interdependence. An assembly has, in one way, it's a simple concept, but there are so many layers that to understand it deeply, we need to constantly remind ourselves that that's the nature of phenomena, that phenomena is assembled. One of the greatest ways that we deceive ourselves is believing that things exist independently. And our habit is to have that view, that things exist independently. And so we have to constantly remind ourselves of the true nature of things being interdependence. And we understand impermanence not just because someone told you things are impermanent, but because you understand the logic of how it works, the interdependent nature of all it is. That is a much deeper understanding of impermanence. And that really creates that view that lets you sail around the world because you don't have to remind yourself it's impermanent, it's impermanent, it's impermanent, it's impermanent. You just see things that way. You just see things as being impermanent. Like you don't think that when you put ice in your glass that it's going to stay ice forever. You know it's going to melt. Then you begin to see everything in that way. You may see people as being both kind of dead and alive, or the cup as being both whole and shattered, because you see that things are not separate from their impermanence. That impermanence is it's just how it is. It is in a state of decay. Everything, once it is created, it is moving towards death. It is dying in some way. It is changing. So Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche says, nothing that exists or functions in the world, no constructs of the imagination or of the physical plane, nothing that passes through your mind, not even your mind itself, will stay as it is forever. Things might last for the duration of your experience of this existence, or even into the next generation, but then again they may dissolve sooner than you expect. Either way, eventual change is inevitable. There's no degree of probability or chance involved. If you feel hopeless, remember this and you will no longer have a reason to be hopeless, because whatever is causing you to despair will also change. Everything must change. So don't despair, because it is conceivable that one day, the countries that we think exist today, those boundaries could change. And one country could become part of another country. Or a country could split in half, could become multiple countries, like how the USSR split. And then now you've got all these different countries in Eastern Europe. It's not inconceivable that you could become a millionaire or a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. It's not inconceivable, because if you create the causes and conditions, it could happen. And because of that, we can also have hope that we can one day become enlightened. We just have to cultivate the causes and conditions for enlightenment. So that's it for today. We'll continue with the other 3 seals in future classes. But for now, let's say the dedication prayer. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.